Notre Dame's preseason camp is in the books, and now all eyes are on Texas A&M as the Irish prepare for the season opener. But who is going to take the field for the Irish when the time comes? It's all coming right up.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. And today is Tuesday, August 20th. And thank you for making this your first listen of the day. I'm Tyler Wojciak, and I'm the host of this here program. I graduated from Notre Dame in 2018, and now I'm a producer at Fox Sports. And as always, you can watch a full episode on YouTube, or you can listen wherever you get your podcast. This is a reminder to like the video and subscribe if you are watching on YouTube, or rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast if that is how you're tuning in today. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Okay. Now that Notre Dame has officially wrapped up its preseason camp, they're going to spend the next 2 weeks preparing for Texas A&M. All the preseason work is basically over. They announced the captains on Sunday night, which is basically the mark of the end of the preseason. By this point, I think the coaching staff knows who they want out there against the Aggies. I'm sure there's a few things that they need to get straightened out over the course of these next 2 weeks, but by now, the coaching staff knows what they have from the guys on this roster. And even though we probably won't see an official depth chart from Notre Dame until next Monday at Mark Freeman's next press conference, I think there's enough information out there to have a good sense of what it's going to look like for the season opener. So today, I'm going to break down what I believe the depth chart looks like on offense, defense, and special teams for Notre Dame. I should point out, though, that Marcus Freeman, Mike Denbrock, and Al Golden have made it abundantly clear that this is subject to change as the season goes along. But I'm going to go over how I see it as we start the season. And it might seem like a simple exercise, but the more I went through this, the more I realized that it's actually not so simple. But there is one simple position on the offense. That's where we're going to start today, and that is at quarterback. There's no doubt Riley Leonard is the starting quarterback for Notre Dame. Steve Angeli is going to be the backup, and I believe that Kenny Minchey is the safe pick to be the third-string quarterback, which leaves C.J. Carr, the true freshman who has a ton of hype around him. He is going to be the fourth-string quarterback during his freshman season, and that is more than okay. I know that in spring practice, he turned a lot of heads. The hype continued to build around him, especially after he came in with a ton of hype surrounding his recruitment. It's okay. We're going to have to be a little bit patient with C.J. Carr because he just has a lot of really good players in front of him. Kenny Minchey is a really good quarterback, and he has one more year of experience in the Notre Dame football program than C.J. Carr, so he is the third-string quarterback. Steve Angeli has been around for a long time. He's a really good backup option, but it begins and ends with Riley Leonard. He's going to be the starter. So no surprise there. Really no big surprise at running back either. I think Jeremiah Love has solidified himself as the running back one option for Notre Dame. Jadarian Price is the number 2, Aeneas Williams at 3, and Kedron Young at 4. Now, there was some discussion about Aeneas Williams potentially surpassing Jadarian Price as the number 2 running back. I don't think that's the case just yet, although Aeneas Williams did have a really impressive camp, particularly in pass protection, which is not something you would expect out of a true freshman. So even though Aeneas Williams is technically the third-string running back, I think he's going to have a legitimate role on this team starting off in the season opener. And even though Kedron Young is the fourth-string guy, I also think he's going to have a role. Maybe it's the short yardage back. We'll have to wait and see, but I think that Jeremiah Love is going to get the bulk of the carries. Jadarian Price is going to be right behind him, and then the true freshmen, Williams and Young, are going to figure out their roles as the season goes along. Now we move on to wide receiver, and this is where it gets a little bit tricky. Okay, so at the starting boundary spot, I think Bo Collins has definitely earned that spot. He is going to be the starting boundary receiver, and we know that Jaden Greathouse is going to be the starting slot receiver. After that, it gets a little tricky, particularly at the field receiver spot. I think going into camp, I would have said that it's going to be Chris Mitchell. I still think Chris Mitchell is going to play a lot, but I think it's going to be like a 1A, 1B situation at field receiver. And I honestly think that Jordan Faison is 1A. Again, they're going to rotate a lot, but I think Jordan Faison is actually going to get the start over Chris Mitchell, and they're both going to have different roles in this offense because Jordan Faison in particular is very versatile. Like, he could be the starting field receiver, but he's also the third-string slot receiver because I think that's his more natural position, but Jaden Greathouse has that locked down. So behind them, I think Jayden Thomas is the backup boundary receiver, and then I think the backup slot receiver is going to be Jaden Harrison, the transfer from Marshall. Those are going to be the primary 6 guys. I know that Notre Dame wide receiver coach Mike Brown has talked about having a 6-man rotation. I think that is what it's going to look like, and these guys are going to be able to move around. It's going to be Bo Collins, Jane Greathouse, Jordan Faison, Chris Mitchell, Jane Harrison, and Jaden Thomas. And then right behind those guys, you're going to have Micah Gilbert, the true freshman. He can play the field and the boundary. I think he's going to be the 7th wide receiver, which leaves Deion Colsey as the 8th man. He is a more prototypical boundary receiver, but I just don't think we're going to see a ton from Deion Colsey unless one of these receivers gets hurt. I'm not forgetting about Cam Williams and Logan Saldate. I just think that with so many guys in front of them, both of those guys are going to redshirt this season, so they are not going to be on this depth chart. Okay, now let's take a look at the offensive line. Oh, excuse me. No, I'm not going to skip the tight end, even though there's no big surprises there. Mitchell Evans is going to be the starter. I think he's going to be full go by the time the season opener rolls around here in just over 2 weeks. It seems like they've been building him up throughout camp. He did not participate in the Jersey scrimmage, but still, he is going to be a factor. But even if they need to, keep Evans a little bit rested as he still recovers from that torn ACL injury that he suffered last fall, Eli Raridon is going to be right there as the number 2, and then Cooper Flanagan at 3, Kevin Bauman at 4, who's finally healthy, good for him, and then Davis Sherwood at 5, who can also play like an H-back kind of player if Notre Dame ever goes into big, heavy run packages. Although, I should point out that it seems like Cooper Flanagan has given Eli Raridon one run for his money to be the backup tight end. I still think it's going to be Eli Raridon, but Cooper Flanagan has had a really impressive camp, and he's going to be a factor on this team, despite the fact that he's the 3rd-string tight end as of today. Okay, now it's time to look at the offensive line because who knows, man? Like, I feel pretty confident in saying that Anthony Knapp has beat out Tosh Baker to be the starting left tackle. In yesterday's episode, I really went over what the situation is on the left side of the offensive line, all the questions going around there, my concerns about starting a true freshman left tackle and potentially a redshirt freshman left guard in the season opener against Texas A&M. So right now, I still think it's going to be Anthony Knapp over Tosh Baker at left tackle, and I think it's going to be Sam Pendleton at left guard over Pat Coogan and over Rocco Spindler. I know that some people still think that it's Coogan's job, even though Sam Pendleton was taking the majority of the first-team reps at left guard in the Jersey scrimmage. Personally, I would feel safer if Coogan were out there, just given the fact that he has started 13 games before. Sam Pendleton would be making his first career start on the road in one of the most hostile environments in all of college football. Plus, he's going up against one of the best defensive lines in college football. It's a very tall task to ask of the redshirt freshman. But if Pendleton has just beat out Coogan and beat out Spindler, and he has shown that he is the better option amongst those 3, then you might just have to wing it and let him go out there and figure it out, because you don't want to play someone who's not as good as another guy just because he has a little bit more experience. It's a very difficult question that Joe Rudolph and Mike Denbrock are going to have to answer, but I do think that ultimately it is going to be Sam Pendleton out there with Coogan as the backup left guard, Rocco Spindler behind him, and then Sullivan Absher as the 4th option. At center, it's going to be Ashton Craig as the starter. That's been like the one spot that we knew pretty much since the moment last season ended. And then I think Pat Coogan is also going to serve as the backup center. Then we're going to move on to the right guard spot where Billy Strouth has solidified that spot. That was never a competition really throughout the spring or camp. It's going to be Billy Strouth as a starter. As the backup, I would imagine Pat Coogan, right? I think that Pat Coogan is just going to be the first guy off the bench for any of these interior offensive line positions. He can play left guard, he can play center, and I think he'd be able to play right guard as well. But if it's not Pat Coogan, Rocco Spindler is also a great option. Rocco Spindler started 10 games last season at right guard, and if they just want to keep all of Pat Coogan's reps on the left side of the ball or as the center, that would make sense. Heard really good things about Rocco Spindler. I think John Bryce from Football Scoop and Irish Illustrated said that Rocco Spindler was mauling dudes in the Jersey scrimmage. That was the exact quote, although it should be mentioned that he was most likely going up against Notre Dame's 2nd-team defensive line unit. So it's impressive. It's good to see that he's still bought in, but I still think that right now Rocco Spindler is kind of the odd man out on the interior of the offensive line, unless Billy Strouth gets hurt and they want to move him in there. But I think that it's going to be Pat Coogan as the first guy off the bench. Then at right tackle, Emil Wagner is going to be the starter. Gerby Lambert has been running with the 2s in practice, but also I don't think that Gerby Lambert would be the first guy off the bench in the Texas A&M game, because Tosh Baker has cross-trained at right tackle, and then he moved over to left tackle once Charles Jagasaw went down. He had the first shot at winning that left tackle job. Obviously, it doesn't look like he was able to do that, as Anthony Knapp has sort of surpassed him. But I do think that if either one of the tackles got hurt in the game against Texas A&M, the coaching staff would feel comfortable putting Tosh Baker out there as the first guy off the bench. But maybe Gerby Lambert changes that as the season goes along. It seems like he had a really, really impressive last week of camp. So I think that he is one guy who could make a move as the season goes along. But as we sit here today, and given the fact that Gerby Lambert really has not been around the team that long because he did not early enroll, he joined the team in the summer, I think that for now, Tosh Baker has a leg up on Lambert to be the first guy off the bench at tackle. So that is how I see the offense as of today. Again, I think there's still a lot of questions about who's going to start at left guard, but that's about it. I think Anthony Knapp has certainly solidified that left tackle spot, and every other position is just about settled. Okay, coming up next, we're going to take a look at the defensive side of the ball, where a surprise player has emerged as the starter on the back end. Today's episode is brought to you by Ibotta. It's summertime, which means it's barbecue season. You can stock up on all of your grilling favorites and earn cash back on every purchase when you use Ibotta. So you won't have to choose between burgers or hot dogs. You can get both. Ibotta is a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop. You can earn on hundreds of items from groceries to beauty supplies, even toys. So you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what it is that you're purchasing. The average Ibotta user earns $256 per year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, that flight you've been eyeing, or the fancy dinner that you've been craving. Other apps give you points that don't really amount to much. With Ibotta, you earn cash back that you can withdraw to your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards. Simply add offers in the app, upload your receipt, and voila, the money is yours. You can save on over 2,400 brands and shop at over 1,000 retailers, including your favorite grocery stores, Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. It's time you joined the over 50 million users who use Ibotta to earn cash back every time they shop. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using the code LOCKEDONCollege when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back and use code LOCKEDONCollege. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store and use code LOCKEDONCollege. College football is back, and the Locked On College Football Podcast kicks off the action with a live season preview tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern on the Locked On College 24/7 streaming YouTube channel. This four-part series covers Notre Dame and each of the four major conferences with discussion on which ACC, Big 10, Big 12, and SEC teams have a shot at the expanded college football playoff. Be sure to check out this special streaming on Locked On College's 24/7 YouTube channel or on Amazon Fire TV, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Compared to the offense, I would say that the defensive depth chart is much more settled and there's far less questions about this group, which isn't really a surprise considering that Notre Dame had one of the best defenses in all of college football last season and returned a bunch of those key players. So let's start off in the defensive line and specifically the strong side end. Don't think there's a lot of controversy here. It's going to be R.J. Oben as the starter. Josh Burnham is the backup, who has had a really, really impressive preseason camp. Al Washington mentioned him multiple times when he spoke to the media about a guy who really made a move, and that's really exciting because R.J. Oben, we know he's a great pass rusher, but can he stop the run? Well, maybe that's going to be Josh Burnham's role this season, and it looks like he's ready to go and step in when his number is called. And then you've got Bryce Young, the third spot right there, the true freshman, the 5-star, the physical freak who's probably just ready to make a big play when he finally gets his chance. I don't think we're going to see him a ton at the beginning of the season, but keep an eye on him as the season goes along. I could see him becoming a factor specifically in the second half of the season. At nose guard, this one's easy. Howard Cross the third, and then you've got Donovan Heinisch behind him. Armel Mukum, who has been a surprise player in preseason camp. I don't think many people thought he'd do anything, but then once Gabriel Rubio got hurt, Armel Mukum stepped in, stepped up, and now he looks like a potential rotation piece along the interior of that defensive line. Then behind Mukum, I've got Sean Sevillano Jr., the true freshman. Might be a redshirt option, but hey, who knows? Al Washington said he could go 11 or 12 deep this season. That could allow Sean Sevillano to play and redshirt this season, but we're going to have to wait and see. Once Gabriel Rubio comes back from his fractured foot, he is going to be the clear backup, but Donovan Heinisch is a guy who's a bulldog. He's ferocious. He's a little bit undersized, but he makes up for that with extreme aggression, and I think he is going to be really fun to watch, and he's going to remind us all of his older brother, Kurt, and how he just really maximized his talent when he was at Notre Dame. So I'm excited to see what Hinish can do this season, backing up Howard Cross. Okay, defensive tackle, the captain, Riley Mills. He's going to be the starter there. Jason Onye is going to be behind him. And then keep an eye out on Cole Mullins. He's a player who impressed in spring practice. He's still the third-string defensive tackle, and there's probably other guys in front of him who would come in that spot as well, like Donovan Hinish or Armel Mukum. But I could see him as a guy who starts to make a name for himself later on in the year, maybe in some garbage time moments. But the depth here on the interior is pretty good. It's obviously going to be better once Howard Cross is 100%. There has been some current concerns about a potential injury there. It looks like he was dealing with some sort of a hamstring injury. Hasn't been a full participant throughout fall camp, but I think he's going to be ready to go for the Irish when they face off against Texas A&M. All right, Viper. Jordan Botelho is going to be the starter. There was like a slight chance, I think, going into camp that maybe Boubacar Traore could surpass him, but it seems like Jordan Botelho is matured. He's been around college for a long time. His career has been somewhat of a roller coaster. He has never really been able to break out quite like a lot of people had hoped, but now he's more mature, he's slimmer, he's in better shape, he's healthy this season, and I think he's poised to have a really big year as the starting Viper. That still means, though, Traore is going to have his opportunities as well. He is a beast at getting after the passer. We saw that on full display last year against USC when he just smoked the right tackle on USC. Got in there, sack, forced fumble on Caleb Williams, then celebrated a little bit too much. Hopefully he has learned basically how to celebrate and not ruin your team's chances there at the end of the half. But I do think he's going to be a big-time player for the Irish this year. And then Junior Tuihalamaka, somewhat of a forgotten player. At one point, he was a big-time linebacker recruit in Marcus Freeman's first class when he was a defensive coordinator. Moved over to Viper. Now Traore's in front of him, and he's been sitting behind Jordan Botelho. But I think he has sort of kind of found his lane. And even though he's the third-string Viper, I do think he's going to rotate in on the defensive line this season. And then Logan Thomas, maybe. I think he's probably more of a redshirt candidate, the true freshman. But he also had a pretty good preseason camp after missing the spring with an injury. And I think in time, Logan Thomas is going to be a very good player. All right, let's look at the linebackers. So if Notre Dame were at a base 4-3 defense and they had the actual Rover out there, the Rover is going to be Jalen Sneed. And backing up Jalen Sneed is going to be Jay Osbury. But as we know, Notre Dame is probably going to be in the nickel defense more often than not, particularly against Texas A&M, which means there's going to be 4 defensive linemen and only 2 linebackers on the field with 5 defensive backs. One linebacker we know who's not going to come off the field is Jack Kaiser. He is going to be the starting weak side linebacker, the will linebacker, and then backing up Kaiser is where it gets interesting. I think Jalen Sneed is going to be the potential backup if they do need to take out Jack Kaiser, because at Mike, we know that it's going to be some combination of Drake Bowen and Kingston Viliamuasa. For now, I think Drake Bowen is going to be the starting Mike linebacker. Kingston Viliamuasa is going to be right behind him. And if they need to rotate those 2 guys out, I think Jack Kaiser could move over to Mike, and then maybe Jalen Sneed could play the will, or Jay Osbury. It's really hard to tell how these pieces are, like, where they fit in terms of their position. But I think in this case, in Al Golden's scheme, it's less about the position that they're in. It's more about, okay, what play are they running? What sort of offense do they anticipate they're going to be going up against? What's the rotation going to look like there? Because as we have discussed on the show, and as linebackers coach Max Bulla has made it very clear, it is going to be a 5-man rotation, which at times is going to be difficult considering that more often than not, there's only going to be 2 linebackers out there on the field. All 5 of these guys are really going to play. Preston Zinter is sort of the odd man out in this mix. He's a redshirt freshman. I don't really see him getting any significant playing time this season. So for when you look at the Rover, you look at the will linebacker, and you look at the Mike linebacker, you could basically put Jalen Sneed, Jack Kaiser, Kingston Viliamuasa, Drake Bowen, and Jay Osbury. Any sort of combination there will work. But I think that the 2 main linebackers you are going to see on the field the most this season are Jack Kaiser and Jalen Sneed. And then behind them, it's going to be Drake Bowen, KVA, and then Jay Osbury, because Osbury is just like one of the most versatile players in the entire defense. He could also play nickel if need be. I do think he's much better suited to play linebacker, but hey, he's versatile. He's a great piece to have for Al Golden in this defense. And watching that linebacker rotation shake out is going to be very, very interesting, specifically against Texas A&M. Okay, I mentioned nickel. The starter there is not much of a debate. It's going to be Jordan Clark, the Arizona State transfer. There were certainly a lot of questions about him when he joined Notre Dame, when he entered, or when he was in the transfer portal, and then he transferred to Notre Dame. His stats at Arizona State were not great last season. He was playing injured, not hurt. Credit to him for toughing it out, playing on a bad team, and really trying to be out there with his teammates. But it seems like now that he's healthy, he has been one of the better players in this Notre Dame defense, and they are going to rely on him a lot as the starting nickel. Now, backing up Jordan Clark, I think it's going to be Rod Hurd. Okay, and this is actually going to lead me into the safety conversation. I didn't want to spoil it, but I kind of have to here. I think Adon Schuler is going to be the starting safety opposite Xavier Watts. Okay, that's a bit of a surprise. I think most people, myself included, just expected Rod Hurd to be the starting safety because he's played over 2,000 snaps of college football for Northwestern before he transferred over to Notre Dame. And don't get me wrong, even if he's not the starter, Rod Hurd is going to play a lot this season. I think if you were to look at it, it's like a 1A and a 1B situation. But I think that Adon Schuler has solidified himself as 1A with an impressive spring practice, good work in the summer, and then that momentum is sort of continued throughout preseason camp. And I think that Schuler is going to be the starting safety, which means Rod Hurd can be the first safety off the bench, and he can also be the first nickel off the bench because that is the position that he played when he was at Northwestern. When Notre Dame recruited him, they didn't want him to be nickel because they needed another safety, and they already had their nickel in Jordan Clark. Behind those two guys at nickel, Clark and Hurd, I think Carson Hobbs, the true freshman, is a good candidate. I don't feel great about a true freshman going out there to play nickel. That is a grown man's position because you not only have to cover tight ends, slot receivers in the passing game, you also have to get in the mix and get in the box in the run game. It's a tall task. That is why Notre Dame has had so much success with a graduate player like Thomas Harper and then Tariq Bracy in the 2 years prior to this one. But it's only the third string nickel. I think Carson Hobbs is going to do okay in that role. Okay, so we kind of skipped the cornerbacks. Starting boundary, that's easy. Benjamin Morrison, no debate there. Backing up Benjamin Morrison, I think if Benjamin Morrison had to come out, Leonard Moore, true freshman, has really impressed a lot of people with his preseason camp. Benjamin Morrison went so far to say that he thinks that Leonard Moore is going to have a better career than him at Notre Dame. That seems like a stretch, to say the least, considering I don't expect Leonard Moore to be starting this year. Benjamin Morrison started basically his entire true freshman season, was a freshman All-American, so I don't know how Leonard Moore is going to beat that from when he's not starting. Either way, he is going to be a very good cornerback for Notre Dame, and I think that right now he is the backup boundary corner. Behind Moore, I think it's actually Christian Gray. Like if for whatever reason Morrison and Leonard Moore could not be the boundary corner, I think Christian Gray would move over to boundary, and then Jaden Mickey would start at field because, as I basically already made it clear, I think Christian Gray is definitely going to be the starting field cornerback, and then Jaden Mickey is going to be right there behind him. Jaden Mickey is still going to play a lot, despite the fact that he's clearly the third true corner on this team, but Leonard Moore is going to get some reps as well. And something that we saw last year was that Notre Dame would give their starting cornerbacks a breather, sometimes at the same time. There was one drive in the Clemson game that kind of made me lose my mind because Notre Dame did not have Benjamin Morrison or Cam Hart out there in a pretty critical drive, and Clemson went right down the field and scored on them. Hopefully they don't do that at the same time this year. If they need to rotate their corners, hopefully they stagger them so that it's not just two younger guys out there or two guys who are clearly not starters. We're going to have to wait and see. Either way, Jaden Mickey is going to get a lot of run as the third corner, and I think Leonard Moore will as well. Carson Hobbs is the other true freshman. I mentioned him already with the nickels. I think he will probably get some reps this year. I think he could be a factor on special teams, but I don't really see him getting a lot of time at the cornerback position. So I already alluded to who I think is going to start at safety, Adon Schuler and Xavier Watts, but I did not mention who I think is going to be backing them up. Rod Hurd is going to be the first safety off the bench, and then behind him, it's going to be Luke Tallage. If there's a true freshman who's going to make a name for himself at safety this season, I think it's going to be Tay Johnson instead of Tabron Benny-Powell. I think the Notre Dame coaching staff would probably prefer to just redshirt Tay Johnson. Like he could still get in with his 4 games, but I don't really think they want to use him a whole lot because he still has a lot to learn about playing the safety position. So I think when you look at the defensive depth chart, the big surprise is Adon Schuler starting opposite Xavier Watts. Maybe the coaching staff decides to let Rod Hurd get a little bit more reps against Texas A&M, just given the fact that he's the more experienced of the two. But I think that when you look at Adon Schuler's playmaking ability, that is enough for him to be the starter. But the rest of the defense, you kind of knew exactly what you were going to get before camp. Most of that is going to remain the same, but I think there's a lot of guys who are either second or third on the depth chart that have really made a move. Guys like Josh Burnham, guys like Vilian Muasa, and even Leonard Moore to some extent. This defense is loaded. They are deep. They are extremely talented, and they are going to be really what Notre Dame relies upon in the season opener and throughout the rest of this season. Okay, when we come back, we're going to wrap up the show with a deep dive on the special teams depth chart. Look, I know that it might not be the most exciting thing, but special teams is a third of the game, and I think there's an interesting unknown back there that is going to have a big impact on this season. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard me talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you today. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel any time. I honestly cannot recommend this enough. I've had YouTube TV for years, and it's great, affordable, and this Sunday ticket option makes it even better. What's better than watching your favorite team every Sunday? The ability to tune in to every other game to check in on your fantasy team and still watch your favorite team. Football season is so close. I'm so excited, and FanDuel allows you to get in on the action like never before. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. All right, let's talk about Marty Biagi's special teams unit. And no, I'm not going to predict who are going to be the 11 guys out there when Notre Dame runs kickoff or kickoff return or anything like that. I'm going to focus on the key positions here. Let's start off with the place kicker. It's going to be Mitch Jeter, the transfer from South Carolina. No real debate there. After somewhat of a shaky spring, like he missed a field goal in the spring game, I think that he has become a lot more consistent, and he is going to be the player that he was at South Carolina, where he only missed 2 field goals in the span of 2 years. I think that Notre Dame is going to need him in some big spots this season, potentially in the season opener against Texas A&M. And the one thing that gives me a lot of comfort is the fact that he played for South Carolina. He's played in these big, hostile environments in the SEC. So this is not going to be new to him. Backing him up, it's going to be Zach Yoakum, who I think might also be the guy handling the kickoffs. I have not heard whether it's going to be Zach Yoakum or Mitch Jeter. Zach Yoakum handled it a couple years ago, but then last year when Notre Dame had Spencer Schrader, who, as you might have heard, has a really strong leg. So Zach Yoakum was not out there on kickoffs, but maybe he is this year. I do not know for certain who is going to be handling that duty between Zach Yoakum and Mitch Jeter. But for now, let's say Zach Yoakum. Okay, so I mentioned Mitch Jeter is going to be the place kicker. Holder is going to be Chris Salerno. You might have heard of the name Salerno. That's because he's the brother of former Notre Dame walk-on wide receiver Matt Salerno. And it seems like Salerno and Mitch Jeter spent a lot of time in the summer getting their connection down, the battery, as they call it. It seems like they are very much in sync now, and I think that has led to a more consistent Mitch Jeter. So now let's move on to the punter, James Rendell, the Australian Football League player who is now the punter for Notre Dame. The talk about him has been one of the funnier things to me in preseason camp. Like the way that they talk about this dude is like a weapon, and how I think Jordan Faison and Jane Greathouse are pretty open about the fact that like it's really hard catching this guy's punt because he can boot it up in the air. It's really far, but it's also not your traditional end-over-end punt like you see from most college punters because he's not really a college punter. He grew up in Australian Football League, so it's a much different ball. It's a much different punt. It's a much different recovery. And that actually makes me think that there's probably going to be a game or two this season in a big spot when James Rendell launches one high up in the sky, and then whoever is the opposing punt returner is going to have some trouble bringing that one down. It's going to end up being a big play for Notre Dame. I would love it if that happened against Texas A&M, but I don't think there's going to be any doubt about who's going to be the starter. It's going to be James Rendell. And if something happens to Rendell, Eric Goins, the old man, the transfer, a guy who's in the military at one point, now is with the Notre Dame football program. I think he's going to be the backup. He could also serve as the backup place kicker as well. I've actually heard some pretty good things about him and what he's done since he joined the team. It's a good option to have back there. Okay, long snapper. Remember the name. Reno Monteforte. He's about 5'7". He's 193 pounds. I think he appeared in 3 games last season as the reserve long snapper in place of Milk. And, he does not look like your traditional Notre Dame football player. He's kind of in the shadows. If he's a long snapper, the best possible thing that could happen for him is that no one ever hears his name, that means he did his job perfectly. And I've actually heard some good things about him. So he's going to be the starting long snapper for Notre Dame. And now for the returners. Kickoff return, not going to be a whole lot of debate there. Jane Harrison, transfer from Marshall. He was an All-American kickoff returner last year. He's clearly going to be the main guy back there. But who's going to be the other guy? I think it's going to be Jadarian Price. I know that Jeremiah Love has said that he wants to be a returner, both punt and kicks. But considering that Jeremiah Love is going to be RB1 for Notre Dame, I think they'd prefer Jadarian Price to be the other option back there, returning kicks. Also, Jadarian Price had a kickoff return for a touchdown last year against USC. It was one of the biggest plays of the entire season, so I think he's a really good option. But then behind Harrison and Price, I think it's going to be Jeremiah Love or maybe even Devin Ford. Although once Devin Ford got absolutely rocked, was it against Tennessee State? I don't know, but he got destroyed on a kickoff, fumbled the ball, was concussed. It was actually a very scary moment. He did not return any kicks, I don't think, the rest of the season. And I would prefer if he's not back there. I would much rather have Harrison, Price, or Love, guys who are much more dynamic out there returning kicks. And that leaves punt returner, the last position we're going to talk about here today. I believe it's going to be Jordan Faison. He returned a couple of punts last year, and they were electric. Now, Chris Tyree did return a punt for a touchdown last season, which felt like the first time Notre Dame did that in literal decades, maybe since the days of Tom Zbikowski. Although Chris Fink, people sleep on him as a punt returner. He had some good punt returns back there as well. But I just love the idea of Jordan Faison out there because once he catches the ball, that guy is so elusive. He's electric, and I think it's perfect for his game when he's just out there in the open field and he has to make guys miss. And also, if he's on punt return, there's probably some guys out there who are trying to chase him down who have no business trying to chase down Jordan Faison. So I'd like to see Jordan Faison. I think it's a bit of an unknown. Maybe the safer option is to put Jaden Greathouse back there, who has been pretty open about the fact, or at least he was last year when he was a true freshman, that he wanted to be the starting punt returner. But that job was held by Chris Tyree, who was a bit up and down because even though he did return a punt for a touchdown, he also tried to lay out and dive for one, and also one bounced right off his face mask in the Clemson game. So I don't know. I think maybe if you wanted to play it safe, go with Jaden Greathouse. But hey, he's fast. He's good with the ball in his hands as well. So it's going to be one of those two guys. If it's not them, I'm going to throw a dark horse candidate in there. Maybe KK Smith. We know that he's really fast. As I mentioned earlier, Mike Denbrock said that he is a candidate to be Notre Dame's deep threat. I think punt return is a good option for him to get out there, make an impact as well. But that is how I see the depth chart on offense, defense, and special teams. Again, I think we're going to find out whatever the real one is next week. But let me know what you think. If there's a position that you think I got wrong, or maybe there's going to be a surprise starter or a surprise backup, let me know in the comments. Hit me up on social media. You know the deal. But that is going to do it for me today. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish your first listen of the day. I'm going to be back tomorrow. I think I'm going to do the final installment of my position preview series. I'm going to do a deep dive on the defensive backs and why I think they could have an even better year this year than they did last year when they led the Notre Dame defense to become I think they were third in pass efficiency defense in the entire country. They were a great unit. They have even more potential this year. Excited to talk about that group. For your second listen of the day, check out the Locked On College Football podcast with host Spencer McLaughlin. Also, please subscribe on YouTube or wherever you're listening to the podcast, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.